Right. Welcome. I'm hearing an echo. Give me 1 second. Okay, hello. There we go. Welcome to this webinar, this corner of the internet. Just situating some settings here. Welcome, Jessica. So glad that you can make it live. Let's see here. Okay. So welcome to those that are here. People might be trickling in later as well, but welcome to also people watching the replay. If you are here at any point, if at any point you want to share with me 3 words as to how you're feeling in this moment, and also throughout this talk, any questions, any insights or opinions or thoughts that you have that come up, please share them as well. If you're watching the replay, I'll have a place where you can give your thoughts, your questions as well. But so I want to just introduce myself based on where I am tuning in to you from. This land is known as, from the original peoples, the Wyatt tribe, also known as Humboldt County, specifically McKinleyville, California. And I am just so grateful to be here, wanting to open with gratitude and of recognition of how special this moment is, how it is no coincidence being here together, tuning into this message together around this topic of what this webinar is called, which is Reimagining Depression. So, given by the title, the name, it might not be the most exciting thing, especially, on a Saturday morning. Like, who wakes up on a Saturday morning wanting to talk about depression, right? But I want to just promise you that when we enter things like this, things that are a little bit more taboo, things that are a little bit more like not things that you would start a party conversation with per se. When we dive into these things, they can lead us to really rich places. They can lead us to places of gold within us. And so that is one of my intentions for doing this talk, for sharing this with you, is in hopefully shedding some light, some also new perspective around what depression is. Like, what is this thing? Another reason why I'm choosing to talk about this is because I see it as something both in my personal life, I feel it as something in my personal life, as well as the lives of people that, may not be front and center about their personal development or like going to therapy, or talking about their feelings or like really like open to the meaning of life. People that are not into that. And then also spiritual teachers of mine, people that are into these things, that do go headfirst into the meaning of life, into really embracing all of their feelings and, that are even in touch with their soul. Even people that are in tune with these things still experience, whether they call it depression or whether they call it the descent, which I'll introduce a little bit more um, about like the differences between those terms and just what they bring. Whatever it is a universal human condition to feel these like low points in our lives. It is universal. It is universal to feel also um, just challenge, also grief, um, if you want to call it suffering in some sense. So I'm here to kind of ask, like, what is this? What can we do with this? And even should we be doing anything with this? How can we approach this? If it's something that is universal to all of us, how can we approach this? How can we be with this in a healthy way? And um, the way that I am introducing this is from what I personally see, from what my perspective is of how consciousness has sort of began, started to, and has been approaching this universal thing, depression. Sort of not like too deep into the history of it. I'm not a historian, but again, from my personal experience of like where we've come from, as far as I can see, just like dabbling in a little bit into that, like where we've come from, like the past, and also the Western slash medical lens of looking at depression, which is where the word originated from. And then sort of creating this map into where we're going with this. What new trajectories, what new paths are maybe forming from these ways that we've known depression to be as. And this is the part where we will reimagine new pathways. So again, this is from my personal perspective. And so also inviting you to incorporate your own perspectives, um, your own meanderings about where this could go. I also am going to include uh, pre-colonial sort of like folk kind of ways that humanity has and continues to look at what depression is, and how it is more so called the descent or a descent or a soul initiation. And part of my intention here also is to not exclude anything out just because it has been done in the past. My intention is to acknowledge and integrate. That is how I believe evolution can happen. I personally like to kind of see where I feel inclined to leave out or push away or even like shun or shame, past ways of doing things because they haven't worked for me. My intention is to acknowledge all of it as much as I can, as much as my sight, my perspective can see. And this is where I also invite you to bring in your perspective. So I want to do this in the name of evolution. And with that, I'll include in like my personal biases, my personal experiences, and acknowledge those, but really wanting to create a bridge here, a bridge between these many pathways that we've been seeing. So with that, I'm actually going to start with a prayer. And this is a prayer that I recently heard on a video format, and it is by Carolyn Meese, a teacher that I have been tuning into recently that has really resonated with my just like with where I am at right now. And if you don't know who Carolyn Meese is, she wrote Anatomy of the Spirit. That was like one of her first books. And she's a publisher, she is a speaker, and she is an absolute divine channel of a being, just opened, really open to the divine. Even she refers to calling the divine the Lord and God, but really it's the divine in general. And that's also something that I'm wanting to bridge here, wanting to really bridge logos or the mind and the ego with the heart and the holy and the divine, not not leaving not leaving one out, not preferring one over the other. I'm really in service to union. I'm really in service to harmony and to balance. And so in talking about this topic of depression, this is one of the things we're going to explore, is like how to bridge depression with the divine, but then also how to bridge depression with logos, with our mind, with our, real ways of our personality that come out nonetheless. So with that, I will begin with the prayer. Make me resilient. I marvel at the resilience of nature. No matter where I look, I see a theater of life in motion. I wonder what my life would look like from a distance, what I would see if I could view my life from a wide cosmic lens. Would I even comprehend the significance of all the currents of life flowing to me, or those avoiding me, as well as those appearing to embrace me? What I would observe of life, I suspect, is that the flow of life, the continuum of life, does not stop for anything or anyone. No one's problems or heartaches are enough to stop the natural rhythms of life. Forests burn and then produce new growth. Earthquakes shape the earth anew. Land rises and falls. No natural form of life mourns the organic shifting of time except us humans. Again and again, we plant our feet in the shaking ground, determined to stop fires in the forests and erupting earthquakes in their tasks of breaking new ground, because we do not want our personal lives to change. Lord, I want the sight to stop the cycles of life, because I'm not sure when those cycles will collapse my own cycles of my own life. I'm not certain I have the resilience to start anew again and again as nature does. And yet I have experienced the grace of resilience flooding in my bones in the exact second I need it the most. Just when I felt despair approach the energy of my heart, suddenly, in an instant, all I could think was that everything was going to be okay. Despair shattered like fragile, thin glass. I wondered how I had come up with such a positive thought, much less believe it. Somehow, in that moment, did I believe that everything would be well with all my heart and soul. Somehow, in that moment, the crisis that burdened me ended in that instant, and I felt your message melt in me that everything would be fine. I knew that I had to relinquish my idea of wanting a certain outcome and let the wisdom plan of my life take over. Whatever I had to deal with so far as people in the ordinary details of my life that feel like paperwork, grant me the grace of resilience in all ways. It is exhausting to try to control all the rivers of my life. The better choice is to become a better passenger, skilled in navigating the ways of nature. For it is when we learn how to become one with all of nature, we find our way to you. Amen. So gratitude to Carolyn Meese for that beautiful prayer. I'm just going to give a moment to drink in the moment and whatever resonated from that prayer within. So again, for those tuning in, Sonia, hello. Thank you for joining. Throughout this talk, I want to invite you at any point to, whether through the chat or through unmuting yourself, you can provide your questions, comments, bring in your thoughts whenever it feels resonant to you. Always an option. And then at the end, I'll have space for questions, conversation, bringing in your perspective. Definitely want this to be participatory and bringing in your perspective, because I feel that it is we, both you that's here and also people watching the replay, we are reimagining these pathways to depression together. I also want to extend the invitation to bring our physical bodies, our physical senses into this, talk of some sort. Noticing where there is resistance, noticing where there's maybe crunchiness, noticing also where there is receptivity, openness, maybe energy or awareness around the heart, maybe energy or awareness coming up into the head, the mind, anything like that. An invitation to have that practice of noticing as we are, touching some things that might bring up sensitivity. I know, speaking personally, they do for me as well. So perfect. Great, Sonia, that's perfect. Come as you are, for sure. Okay. So again, this little map that I've found has come about from this is I'm going to touch on where we've come from, so to speak, with depression, particularly the Western medical lens, because, depression does come from that paradigm, the word depression. And then I also want to touch on pre-colonial ways, like before the before psychology was medicalized as much, what it was like or what it meant to approach these low points in our human existence, what it was like to approach it from those ways. And then alchemizing all of that, acknowledging it, embracing it into new ways and new pathways, reimagining how to move forward with those, with depression. So the APA, the American Psychological Association, deems depression as a clinical mood disorder that is, proven by hormonal biological imbalances in the brain of certain hormones that involve states of apathy, lethargy, loss of purpose, or meaning in life. It is viewed as an abnormal experience or state to be in. And usually, when you go to a provider with this kind of ailment of saying, like, I think I'm depressed, or even if they are the ones to label it as that, they see it as a set of symptoms that need to be quote unquote decreased with treatment options that have been, scientifically researched to and proven to decrease these symptoms of sadness, apathy, numbness, loss of purpose, loss of excitement, all of those things. And so it is seen as successful treatment when those symptoms have decreased. So there's usually a focus on the individual. There's usually a focus on, like, the patient having some sort of, circumstance in their life, perhaps, whether recent or maybe from childhood, where it is kind of seen as causing this kind of depression. Sometimes it's hard for the patient to locate any kind of reason as to why they're feeling that way. Actually, often they have no idea why they're feeling that way. And that's what makes it a little bit more confusing. But sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, sometimes there is less of a regard around, like, collective, political, larger circumstances at play that might be contributing to that depression. Even like going down a notch from that, the family of origin, even that the person is participating in or not participating in, or in relationship with, sometimes that's not acknowledged as well. This is more specific to, like, a psychiatric approach. Of course, if the person is in counseling, those things might be addressed a little bit more, but still it can be generalized that it focuses on the individual a little bit more. So I found it interesting. I've never actually looked this up, but I felt inspired to look this up, of what the etymology of the word depression means. I've sort of intuitively, as you can hear from the word, I've intuitively felt that it's like it represents pressure. So press is in the word depression. Suppression, repression are usually things associated with depression. But I also found out that it's an astronomy term, I think from the 1400s, where it means the angular distance of a star below the horizon. So that will, I'll give a little bit more of context to that as we go into some astrology, and reference to astrology with depression. But I thought that was interesting. So we may or may not be familiar. We are probably familiar with the Western lens of how to approach depression. It's like you receive usually psychiatric medication for it. It helps lessen these feelings of, or these symptoms. I will say here that there are ways in which this lens is beneficial, and there are ways in which it is not comprehensive to how to approach depression. I acknowledge and I embrace if we're looking at human consciousness from, like, a bird's eye point of view, it was the perfect manifestation and way to sort of like continue opening a doorway into this universal thing that we all have as humans. For us to even like start to peek into it and to be with it, to accept, to bring to the surface of consciousness that this is a thing. It has been, and I have seen me personally experiencing this treatment myself, and then also being a counselor and role, like professional role in people that are incorporating the Western lens of treatment into their experience of depression. I have seen how it is effective. Not for myself. It wasn't effective for myself, I will say, but I've seen how it is effective for others because of where they are at. And for that, again, I see it as a doorway, and I see it as having benefit to it. And from my perspective, I think that it is beneficial for those that need, again, like some kind of bridge into being able to acknowledge and accept this from within, but that need like an easeful way into doing so because there might be a backlog, a very like dense backlog of repressed emotions that actually might be dangerous to just fully let out all at once per se, than if they were to do it slowly by just starting with like a foundation of like, I'm going to accept that this is a thing that I live with, and I'm going to experience I'm going to experience proof that there can be some sort of relief to this thing. But then the saga kind of continues. It continues, and there has started to be, and not even just recently, like more than a few years back, there has started to be this sort of new branch of how to approach depression that is not better than, but that can serve as a just like a complement to what the Western lens has brought. So with that, I'm going to move into kind of like a pre-colonial soul based way of navigating depression. And I also want to mention that this way of looking at depression is not just from the old times or like the pre-colonial times. It's very much still living through today. I'd even say that it's like a parallel like timeline, if you will, to the Western medical lens. And again, it has to do with depression as a soul initiation. So where the Western lens looks at depression as something that's, it should be kind of like seen as symptoms, and it's like something that can be lessened and kind of just maybe put off to the side, or that it's just there, and usually there's some context of it being like, this is something you will navigate for the rest of your life, it's always going to be there, try to cope kind of thing. which again is better than being like in despair over this thing. But with depression as a soul initiation, there is this approach, there's this sense of like depression is something that is a part of our natural cycle. It is a part of nature. And so there's similarities there. Western lens says like it's always going to be there. And then in this way, it's also a sense, there's also a sense that it's like a part of our nature, like ingrained in us somehow. But lean into it. Lean into it because there's something there for the larger context of our lives, for how we make meaning out of our lives, and also how we become in touch with even our purpose. So there's this sense of like, lean into it, open the door wider. Don't try to just like push it off to the side in some sense. So I'll go into kind of something again that is, it may or may not be a familiar way of looking at things. I think that it can be a familiar way of looking at depression where, like it's a little poetic. It's like, I feel as though if talk to a friend about feeling down, being in this low period in your life, um, like a kind of more common way of providing sympathy for a friend going through this is like, oh, don't worry, like this is a season in your life. This is it's not going to be here forever. It's not permanent. It's a phase kind of thing, and I'll be here with you as you go through this phase. And what this kind of points to is the 4 seasons: summer, fall, winter, and spring. So depression can be synonymous to the winter season of the earth. It's an inevitable part of all of the seasons. So there's both an inevitability, a consistent presence, but also a cyclical presence to this force, this depression. Now kind of beginning to talk about it and going to name it as an inner descent, a soul descent, a soul initiation. So it's a psychological experience that also connects us back to something bigger than us, a force that is bigger than what our mind, our human personality, our human preferences, our ego, if you will, wishes to plan for, wishes to happen. None of us wish to have challenge or pain or suffering in our lives. And yet it happens. And from this context, it's because of it being a part of a larger cycle of nature. And going further into what these cycles of nature, like the 4 seasons, can bring, is a pan-cultural indigenous framework for the evolution of our maturity, of our psychological maturity, which is known as the medicine wheel and or the 4 directions. So let me know if you're familiar with this, but basically it is a circle and a wheel. And I don't have a diagram for this, although in this moment I wish I did. I'm not a PowerPoint kind of person. So if you can imagine a circle with 4 quadrants, each of them representing the 4 seasons like we just went over, but then also uh, the 4 kind of developmental chapters of our lives, beginning from the South, representing our childhood, and then the West, representing the autumn or the fall and our teenagehood. And to just go back to summer, or the South, that represents summer as well. So then we go up to the next direction, which is the North, which is synonymous to the winter season. And that is synonymous to the adulthood portion of our lives. And then we move on to the East, which is synonymous to the spring season and also the elderhood period of our lives. So if we go back to winter, we can kind of have that be, and it has been taught to me as well. And in my experience, I refer to that season, that direction, as a place, a part of the cycle that we can experience a soul initiation, an inner descent, a depression kind of experience in. We go through our lives, with linear time. We are children first, literally speaking. We're children first, and then we're teenagers, and then we're adults, and then we are elders. I also want to say here that the reason why this framework, why the medicine wheel is so beneficial to approaching these descent periods of our lives is because we have a sort of long-term memory where all of these parts of us, all of these maturity stages of ourselves can be present with us no matter where we are in linear time. So for example, me personally, I am and have been entering into the winter portion of my life, adulthood. I still find myself feeling and having my childhood experiences and memories still bubbling up to the surface time and time again, wanting to be integrated, needing to be felt still and learned from. I also feel my elder self, my crone self, if you will, being female, identifying with me in various times in my life where I feel this part of me, perhaps like a foresight, if we're kind of exiting out of linear time, perhaps a memory of me already being there in some sense of my older self. This and usually comes with this very wise, very compassionate, very easeful experience and emotion with it. So this starts to get into inner parts work. If you've heard of that before, it's a really special time, I think, because humanity and consciousness right now is able to kind of feel that and interact with ourselves in a way where we can feel these different parts of us, these different phases of our development overlap with each other, with where we are in linear time, with also where we are in mythic time or nonlinear time. And this is helpful when we are in a descent, because if this framework, if there's this sense, this context of like, lean in, go further in, be fearless actually into this sometimes painful, challenging, maybe dense part of our lives, because there's something to retrieve from there. There's some gold to retrieve from there. Then that is where we might find these different parts of ourselves, and those different parts of ourselves have clues, they have wisdom, they essentially open the door into an experience where we can remember our wholeness, where we can embrace that one memory of a painful experience of feeling exiled, feeling left out in our childhood, and psychically being with that part of us, feeling that memory as alive as it did in the time that it happened, embracing, bringing that part of us back into our center, back into the present moment that we're in here now. Then we can feel a sense of wholeness and a sense of integration and a sense of safety again. And if we go back to how depression, the etymology of depression is like the act of pressing down or feeling this pressure. What if that pressure is from a sort of what's the word, like, what if it's a benefic, what if it has a benefic essence to it? In other words, what if it's trying to help us? What if it's trying to, what if the pressure is so big? What if it feels like pressure because our mind is trying to have us go in this one direction, but then our soul has to sort of like course correct, and it feels like pressure because we have these two conflicting parts of ourselves trying to go opposite ways. But what if there is a divine, benefic soul part of ourselves that is trying to say, look at this part of yourself, or look at this new pathway that I'm wanting to bring you into that is actually a part of your destiny. And so that is one way that I feel can provide ease in how to look at these kinds of descent periods in our lives in the context of the medicine wheel.
It sounds like what you're talking about is faith. It's kind of like the faith in the something larger current, or just trusting that there's forces at play that are beyond like your individual ego that have your best interest in mind.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that is definitely something that I'm really trying to tie into the context of depression, because I really want to bridge like the divine and the soul with something that has, in some senses, especially from like a Western lens, been stripped of that opportunity for faith and of that opportunity for cultivating greater trust. So thank you. Yes. So something that something that I found interesting that I am I sort of learned for the first time. I think that like if I sat with this, I could come to these kinds of conclusions, but this is sort of like a branch of something sort of new that I've learned in um visualizing what the pathways for this talk were to be have to do with Bill Plotkin's perspective on um the medicine wheel, where how we are able to see each of the four parts, each of the four directions as a part of our um, psychological development. What does it look like when a certain part is unbalanced, per se? And how does that contribute to an experience of what we know as depression or a soul initiation or an inner descent? So when we're looking at the South or our childhood, often when we're children, we're like so animated and we're so full of life and we're so like, rah, like, having recently been born. We have so much energy. And so, um, with that comes with a lot of emotions. Um, and so oftentimes, because those emotions are so big and so powerful, they often have to be managed first instead of digested. So we kind of learn how to manage these things. We kind of learn this is where we learn how to have like an inner protector, an inner critic, the part of us that says, "Oh, I have to close my heart now." Or, "Oh, I'm not safe here. I'm not safe to feel this." Or, "Oh, I'm not safe to pursue this." Or, um, "Oh, I've experienced someone having like a backlash or just a negative reaction to when I had this emotion. So now I'm carrying that through in my later life." The there there's an evolutionary reason to this when we're children. It like sort of aids in our survival in a certain sense. However, not it's not sustainable, obviously. And so when we are like in a summer portion in our lives per se, when we feel like we're in like a peak experience of our life, we can also maybe feel the shadow or the imbalance of this part of our life because we have maybe like some kind of emotional memory or in real time something happening where it's a big emotion and we have to learn how to actually digest it instead of manage it. And there will always be a time when we are actually ready for that. And usually that's when we are a little bit older, an adult, into the winter or, yeah, adult portion of our lives. However, if we continue to just manage emotions, that is when an imbalance can happen. Let me know if this is making sense. So, the imbalanced or like shadow version of being in the West or the teenage um, developmental phase of ourselves is when we are not, when we don't have access to meaning making, imagination, inspiration, and life purpose. So, again, going back to the um, sort of general way that we can describe depression is like lethargic, apathetic, not wanting to get out of bed, feeling like what am I there's nothing to get up for in life. So in our teenagehood, uh, or we can look to the essence of our teenagehood if we are not literally in that time of our lives. We can look to that direction in the medicine wheel. We can look to that part of ourselves within to use and cultivate meaning making, imagination, bringing in art, bringing in poetry, bringing in things, activities that do not have a goal to them, that do not have a certain um like needs to an end sort of thing, that doesn't have like a goal to it that needs to be accomplished. Letting this muse from within us sort of run wild, and how that is a branch of how to work with the descent. We can look to the north, of course. We might even situate ourselves if we're using this framework of like, I'm in the north right now in my life. I'm in a descent. I'm in a winter part of my life. So the imbalance here that's possible is having a blocked ability and creating relationship, or no, sorry, having a blocked ability to manifest and create life purpose. So this kind of points to like being able to work with the physical realm, with resources, with money, with managing linear time, with like our daily routines of our work in the world. When we're not able to align our soul purpose, our both innate gifts, and our talents and our passions, merging that with what the world actually needs, with what our maybe local community needs, um, with what we can actually provide as a service in the world, that's depressing. that can be that can be depressing. So then the descent here, this can be sort of like a place where our life is asking us to let go of these other plans that we may have had and like align our talents and our purpose with our service in the world, with our manifestation of our life purpose, of our actually instead of purpose, I would say like our vocation. Like, yes, our career, but in a larger sense, in a soul sense, our vocation, like our mission in this lifetime. So then we can also look to, lastly, the East. We know that the East is known as the spring season, our elderhood part of our lives or of our inner self. And if we have this part of ourself imbalanced, it can be seen as a blocked ability in creating a relationship with spirit or a larger picture thinking. So I want to emphasize on relationship with spirit or relationship with divine. And it's something that I kind of opened this talk with, and in what the prayer at the beginning has pointed to, which is how sometimes a beautiful way to approach be in relationship with a descent period in our lives is to cultivate the ability to let go. And I'm going to bring in the idea of transcendence here, and I'm going to also give there's like nuance to this too. But just being with the ability to transcend not we are needing to do or our responsibilities that are necessary in our lives, but in transcending our mental ideas that want to keep us safe, but that may not be aligned with our actual divinely led path in our life. And so sometimes the descent is about letting go. It's just about letting go. It's about meeting that spot where sometimes our conversation with God it can feel a little quiet. It can feel like there's crickets. It can feel like, oh my God, like I've gone through this whole, you know, plan. I'm like reaching this like standstill in my life. I've like done so much. I've done so much inner work. And yet here I am feeling blank, feeling uh maybe powerless. But this is where a beautiful like eldership kind of mentality or kind of essence and approach can come through. Where in these moments and phases of emptiness, we can feel immense trust. We can actually experience a force that is larger than us. We can actually experience something else that is, I want to say taking the wheel. I know that's like a cliche saying, but something else that really has the reins, something natural, something of nature. So, um, tuning into our bodies in this moment are inviting us to, as I kind of conclude what is maybe a pre-colonial approach to depression. I just want to also point to like the nuance that I said I was going to point to in transcendence. This is something that we have to be we have to discern when transcendence is appropriate. um Transcendence is appropriate when we don't have any threads of avoidance in our lives, avoidance of our responsibilities, avoidance of or escapism of maybe something that we know that we are needing to embrace, that we are needing to do. That is coming from our soul, not from our like ego sense of like should do's. Um, I will, yeah, I'll go as far as to say that transcendence comes with a sense of like feeling balanced in other areas of our lives as well. The other areas of the four directions of like this is a reason why elderhood is at the end of our linear life because this comes after we have managed and digested our emotions. It also comes after when we have learned how to make meaning of our lives, when we've learned how to access um, the creative, like muse force within us. It also comes after like our adulthood, when we've actually like made something tangible with our career, with our vocation. Um, and not saying that you can't experience like transcendence or a connection to spirit when you're an adult or even when you're a child. Um, what I'm saying is to use your own personal discernment here, because this is also um a and I feel like an active conflict within the conversation of how to approach depression in these multiple ways, where again the goal here is to merge like a Western medical lens with a soul-based pre-colonial lens of how to approach depression, because uh transcendence has definitely been used as a disguise for um when escapism and when avoidance is actually happening. So um if I'm like ever your if I'm ever working with you, if I feel like I'm seeing this, I will just always bring this up or like provide this as a question for you to inquire into for yourself. But really, this is all up to us individually to discern where we are coming from. I hope that made sense and that you could grasp where I'm coming from with that. Okay, so just checking time here. Lastly, I'm just going to like quickly go over some astrology reference here, because this is part of the work that I do as an astrologer, um, and also as someone that is a lover, a devotee, a teacher, a student of the natural cycles of nature. It includes our cosmology as well. So, just, this isn't very like in depth as it could be. As you know, astrology can go very, very in depth, but I just want to bring forth the planets Saturn and Pluto as just upfront the ones that I feel are synonymous to depression or a soul descent. Saturn is long-term thinking. Saturn is also the elder. Saturn also represents like our tangible reality, our physical reality when we're working with Chronos, linear time. And it also represents karma. It's in that sense, karma is uh how our past actions are creating momentum into our present moment and what we are creating with our present moment. And then in the grand scheme of things, what legacy we're leaving behind based on what we've done in our lives. And there's no good or bad here. It just is whatever momentum we've been creating and then following, that creates our legacy, that creates long-term effects. And this is essentially connected to our purpose. So our soul has an inclination, a desire to manifest a particular way, a particular essence through particular specific mediums, careers, fields of study, ways of doing things, actions that will activate this truth within each of us that we each have an individual uniqueness for. But it can be confronting and it can lead us to a descent. It can lead us to depression when perhaps the sort of momentum that we've been building or that we've been unconsciously following throughout our lives is not aligned with our purpose. And so then we have to like steer the ship. We have to we have to stop momentum. And those periods of descent can help us stop that momentum. And so, in that sense, they can be a gift. But we have to stop the momentum, and then we have to steer the ship and steer our karma, align our will with the will of the divine, and live more in our purpose, in our truth. So then we have Pluto. Pluto is like, where is the wound? What is the wound? Feel the wound, alchemize the wound, get to the root of like why, for example, maybe I have, and this is not real, but I'm just saying an example, like why I have such an insecurity to opening up to love and relationships, and why I feel this like deep-seated thing of that everyone is going to betray me, that I am going to experience betrayal and lies and inauthenticity, maybe even like abuse or like imbalanced power dynamics in my relationships. Why am I feeling that? Where in my ancestry, like going back in time, going maybe just to like the early part of my current lifetime, getting to the root, whatever that means, of a wound is what Pluto does. And we need a descent. We need to go like down into a cave to be able to look at those things, because when we are out in the like what I'll call the middle world, when we're out in like consensus reality, it's not as easy to access those parts of ourselves and then to like alchemize those parts of ourselves. Pluto wants us to go there for our own benefit. Pluto wants us to access more of our life force and our power when we discover, oh, I just had like a prior lifetime experience to this. Like, that's why I'm going to do a ritual. I'm going to go out into nature and do something in this sort of like liminal mythic time to embrace that part of me, forgive that part of me, let that part of me know that it's safe, so then I can move forward, so that I can be more conscious of when I feel these insecurities coming up in my relationships, but still open up to love more fearlessly than I have before. So astrology brings about these different also paradigms and parts of ourselves that can help us be in relationship with as we are in this descent. And it can help further us into the purpose of a soul initiation, which is just that. An initiation is like a calling forth of a larger part of you, of a more integrated part of you. It's a calling forth of your evolution, of your growth, of your wisdom, of your power, of your gifts. This can be all for the better. And there are ways in which this is all for the better. So, beginning to wrap all of this up, bring all of this into a balanced, integrated way, path into how we can be, or in just like what we can make out of this universal human experience that we all have, feeling depressed at certain times, feeling just taken down into the cave, so to speak, over and over again, into a descent over and over again. It's like, what if you already do all of these things, or like you have these kinds of perspectives. And then you're still sort of depressed. You still find yourself in these low periods of your life. What then? I'm also speaking from personal experience here. So what has come to fruition based on this inquiry? I'm like sort of like pushing the edges of of human where human consciousness is going to go next, like I find myself actively participating with this and by no means have like the sure answer to this. And maybe someone else is further down the line than me, probably, actually, and that's okay. But here in this moment, what has unfolded from that is the practice of dipping into or committing to a lifelong practice of letting go of our true innate innocence and of the forever evolution of this thing within all of us, of this soul that comes with all of its mystery within all of us, of bringing in the opportunity to be with the holy, whatever and however that feels and looks like to you. Entering into a new dimensions of what true faith, like, there's just like such a feeling with this. Just like the kind of faith that comes from doing everything that you can. The kind of faith that is like the sixth time that you've had to tell yourself, okay, I have to really trust here, of like a certain situation that is happening where, maybe like something happened and you're like, okay, I got this, I got this. I have faith. I know this is all happening for a better reason. And then like a month goes by, nothing lets up. You're still there. You're like, okay, 3 months go by and you're like driven down even more into this like descent, this depression. And you even tell yourself like, oh my God, I'm like depressed. I have not felt like myself consistently within like 3 whole months. Like, it's like, okay, we're getting there. It's like, okay, like I'm trusting you. And then like 5 months go by. You've tried all of these different things. You've managed your emotions, you've digested your emotions. You've done an anger ritual. You've kind of like pursued these different ideas for yourself of like how to do something or how to relate to someone, or a new creative project to pursue. You've remembered a little bit more of like what your life purpose is. And still you find yourself in this sort of like chokehold or something. You still tell yourself like, okay, that's it. I don't know what else to do. That is a spot, like that spot. Can you trust there? Can you have faith there? And experience something truly outside of yourself, but also within you. Something where life truly hands you grace, where you can truly, without a doubt, it is so unreasonable as to how it happens. It is completely outside of reason, ration, logic. Can you trust and have faith and open up there so that you can meet the power of something so holy, so divine, so outside of your control and outside of your ego? That is a pathway. That is a pathway that that all of this can bring us to. That we can maybe deepen into imagining and feeling and experimenting for ourselves. That I would love to hear about. If you experience within your life, if you have experienced this before in your life, please let me know. And this kind of goes back to, reminds me of a part of the prayer that I spoke to before, at the beginning of the talk here today, where it says, somehow in that moment, even when I felt a crisis that burdened me, in that instant, I felt your message melt into me that everything would be fine. I wondered how I had come up with such a positive thought, much less believe it. So it comes out of the blue. It's something that it arises from a true emptiness, a true letting go. And it's not just telling yourself that everything is going to be okay. It's not just like having that, like, everything's going to be okay. It's like fully believing it. It comes with the sensations of an open heart, of sort of like when you open a window and a fresh spring breeze flows in. Something akin to that. I'm really trying to put words to something that is really hard to put words to. But here we are imagining this pathway together. The other part of the prayer that this reminds me of is it is exhausting to try to control all the rivers of my life. The better choice is to become a better passenger, skilled in navigating the ways of nature. For it is when we learn how to become one with all of nature, we find our way to you. So there's something about fully taking our hands, our ego, our mind off of doing all of these things. Again, nuance here. Don't get me wrong, it can be really helpful to do all these things. The 4 directions, going to a psychiatrist, therapy, counseling, psychic development, all these things, right? There's this other spot here, though, that I just wanted to point to that can be a part of reimagining these pathways to being with this universal, taboo human experience. Depression, the descent. And so with that, there's so much more that I could say, but I just want to honor time here. I think that it's a good time to wrap up with one last quote that I really liked. It's by Rainer Maria Rilke, and it says, "You see, I want a lot. Maybe I want it all. The darkness of each endless fall, the shimmering light of each ascent." ... So it continues. But what this points to is that maybe this is it. This is it. Even these points where we find ourselves here, where we think that this isn't it? What if this is it? Being able to touch those depths. Who are you when you're in those depths? What comes from you? What emerges organically from you? What comes to meet you? Who comes to meet you? As well as when we are in those beautiful, peak, shimmery, open times of our lives. So, with that, I want to extend my biggest gratitude for listening, whether you were here live or watching the replay. It is my greatest honor to present this and want to acknowledge that there are so many other nuances. I didn't even talk about when depression can come from having actual tragic experiences that bring about grief. I didn't talk about physical death or psychological death too much, but I want to know from you what came up for you. If you agree with these reimagined pathways or all of these pathways that I've presented, if you have another pathway that came up for you for how to approach this force within us. And I want to extend the invitation to for us to be together in this space through working with you. If you are wanting someone that is a sort of guide like role, and are wishing to cultivate your own physical or psychic, well, yes, both physical and specifically psychic development, this is having a practice to be able to be in this spot where faith and trust is the most difficult. Like an akashic practice, an akashic record practice, this is what I teach. This is what I love. This is what I have experienced for myself. So I also incorporate astrology readings within my practice. And essentially, part of my presenting this talk is because this is the why. This is the why behind the astrology, behind the akashic records. This is the what that these practices, these tangible practices can bring about. Together with my experience in the mental health field, with being, I'm not a licensed counselor, but being a counselor type of role for you, where our sessions are typically sort of like talk therapy kind of experiences, where I teach about these certain perspectives, but I also give room for what is alive within you. And within our conversation, I promise you that you will be more in touch with your personal mythos, the storyline of your soul, of your purpose, of also being in touch with this larger force of nature that we find ourselves in. I promise you, you will feel more in touch with the divine as well and cultivate a relationship to spirit, like in the East, as well as touching into the other parts of the four directions. We touch upon all of those areas of your life as well and cultivate a greater relationship with those parts of you. So I offer one-on-one sessions. Well, all of them are one-on-one, but one-off sessions of the personal mythos session is one where we do an astrology reading, and also some akashic channeling is involved in that as well. That is a really great starting point to work with me in this way if you haven't already. I also do specifically akashic record readings, where that is also opened by a prayer. I devote myself to being a clear channel, a clear messenger for any questions, any inquiries that you may have about your life at large and maybe difficult situations that you may be going through. We explore what it's like to look at those things from a akashic perspective, from a place of compassion and of that deep trust and faith. And then I offer longer mentorships where we work for 3 to 9 months, and we integrate all of these teachings and these practices. I show you how to open your own akashic records. You become more familiar with astrological literacy, in terms of what parts of those selves, um, which planets and your specific natal placements, how that translates into your personal mythos and the storyline of your life. So, with all of this, I'm in service to truth, enchantment, and purpose. And in this way, this is my how to tackling this universal human force, these places that we find ourselves in. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be able to speak this with you. I hope that this brought up something fruitful for you, brought forth new perspective, brought forth hope, trust. More questions are also great. I also say lean into the questions. It's the questions that really bring forth the thing that we are looking for within answers. So, without further ado, I will conclude this transmission, this conversation, and I hope to hear back from you, and to keep in touch over this topic. Many blessings. Have a great rest of your day.